Have you ever been told you don't belong somewhere, even when you knew, deep down, you had every right to be there? Imagine walking onto a plane, ticket in hand, only to be judged not by your seat number, but by the color of your skin. That's exactly what happened to Selena Moore, except there was one thing the crew didn't know. Selena wasn't just any passenger. She was the CEO of the very airline they worked for. In that moment, she had a choice: stay silent, swallow the insult, and let injustice pass, or stand tall, speak her truth, and change everything in front of an entire cabin of witnesses. What would you have done? Would you have the courage to keep your seat when the world tells you to move? This is not just a story about humiliation. It's about power, dignity, and what happens when justice takes flight at 30,000 feet. Stay with us, because what Selena did next shocked an entire industry. If this story touches something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive in. The low hum of Dallas-Fort Worth International filled the air, a mix of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the occasional hiss of a departing jet. At Gate C-18, Aurora Airlines Flight 728 was preparing for boarding to New York. Passengers gathered in clusters, families juggling strollers, business travelers tapping impatiently at their phones, retirees clutching printout itineraries. In the middle of the crowd stood Selena Moore, ticket in hand. At 46, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had weathered storms, both personal and professional. She wore a navy blazer, dark jeans, and flats, nothing flashy, nothing that hinted at her true role. To anyone watching, she was just another passenger waiting to board. What nobody recognized, what almost no one ever guessed, was that Selena Moore was the chief executive officer of Aurora Airlines, the very company whose logo gleamed on the gate monitor behind her. Selena didn't want them to know. Not today. She was conducting what she called a blind audit, a habit she had developed in recent years. Every few months, she traveled incognito on her own airline to experience what regular passengers experienced. No entourage, no special notes in the system, no glossy red carpet treatment, just a boarding pass and the simple expectation of dignity. It was a practice born out of conviction. Selena had once been a flight attendant herself, hustling trays up and down narrow aisles, swallowing insults from passengers who saw her skin before they saw her professionalism. Later, as she climbed the corporate ladder, she remembered every microaggression, every time she was treated as less than. She had promised herself two things she would never forget those moments. And if she ever had power, she would build a company where respect wasn't negotiable. 5 years into her tenure as CEO, Aurora Airlines was thriving record profits, growing routes, and customer satisfaction scores that analysts once thought impossible. Yet Selena knew numbers could lie. A glossy report meant little if, beneath the surface, bias still shaped how people were treated. And so here she was, standing at Gate C-18 ticket for Seat 2A, first class, clutched in her hand. "First class boarding now," the gate agent announced, his voice practiced but flat. The line shuffled forward. A tall man in a tailored suit presented his ticket, smiled, and was waved through with barely a glance. A mother with 2 kids in tow followed, juggling backpacks and snacks. Then it was Selena's turn. The gate agent, a young man with thinning blonde hair and a name tag that read Caleb Foster, took her ticket. His eyes flicked from the boarding pass to her face, then back again. "Are you sure this is the right gate, ma'am?" he asked. Eyebrows arched, Selina felt a familiar sting, a subtle jab that cut deeper because it was so unnecessary. She kept her tone even. Yes, Flight 728 to New York. Caleb studied the ticket longer than he had studied the last 3 combined. His lips pursed. This is a first-class seat. I'm aware, Selina replied softly. For a second, he looked as if he might say something more. Instead, he cleared his throat. May I see your ID? Selina slid her driver's license across the counter. She noted the irony none of the passengers before her had been asked for ID. Caleb's eyes moved between the license and the screen, and then something flickered across his face. Selina Moore, he murmured, the name catching in his throat. Yes, she answered, meeting his gaze, like the CEO. Her tone was calm, almost teasing, but inside she registered every detail: the pause, the hesitation, the disbelief. Caleb quickly returned her ID, suddenly flustered. Enjoy your flight, Ms. Moore. Selina took back the boarding pass, nodding politely. She didn't let the irritation show, but she felt it settle under her skin. This is my airline, she thought, and even here, I'm questioned. As she walked down the jet bridge, she scribbled a quick note in her leather-bound journal. Gate agent requested ID selectively. Subtle bias. Needs review. Boarding the aircraft. Selina stepped into the softly lit first-class cabin. Plush leather seats lined the rows, each equipped with wide armrests, personal screens, and crisp white headrest covers embroidered with Aurora's logo. A flight attendant smiled warmly at the man ahead of her, offering to hang his jacket. When Selina reached her seat 2A by the window, no one came to greet her. She slid her carry-on under the seat and settled in. The cabin was a world of contrasts, the gleam of champagne flutes, the faint scent of citrus from freshly wiped trays, the low murmur of conversations about mergers, vacation homes, and conferences. Selina's presence, in her simple blazer and natural curls, was just another contrast one some people would embrace, and others would quietly resist. As passengers continued to file in, Selina leaned her head against the window for a moment. Outside, the Texas sun glared off the tarmac, painting the fuselage of Aurora Airlines Flight 728 in streaks of gold. She remembered the first time she had walked down an airport jet bridge 25 years ago, a nervous young woman in a crisp uniform, hoping no one noticed how terrified she was. Now, she was in charge of it all. And yet, here she was, still made to feel like a stranger in her own house. She inhaled deeply, let it out slowly, and whispered to herself, "Let's see what today reveals." Selina adjusted her seatbelt and glanced around the first-class cabin. Most of the other passengers were already seated. The familiar hush settled over the section, broken only by the clink of ice against glass and the faint shuffle of attendants preparing for takeoff. To her left, in 2B, sat a man in his late 50s. He had neatly combed silver hair, a pressed Oxford shirt, and the air of someone accustomed to being listened to. When Selina offered a polite smile, he nodded back and curt, then turned to scroll on his phone. His name tag on the carry-on bag by his feet read Henry Walker. She recognized the name, faintly likely an executive of some regional bank or consulting firm. Across the aisle, a younger woman fidgeted with her earbuds. She had thick-rimmed glasses, a laptop covered in stickers, and the restless energy of someone who lived half her life online. Maya Lopez. Her boarding pass had said when she showed it to the attendant, she couldn't have been older than 22. Selina noticed her stealing glances, as if torn between curiosity and hesitation. Selina looked away, reminding herself today wasn't about her ego. She was here to observe, to feel. The first-class service began almost immediately. Two attendants moved briskly down the aisle, one carrying a silver tray with champagne flutes. The lead flight attendant introduced herself Marianne Collins. Her voice had that polished, rehearsed quality of long practice, but her eyes skimmed over Selina without pause. She set a glass before Henry Walker with a smile that bordered on reverence. "And for you," Sir Henry chuckled, adjusting his cufflinks. "Bubbly is fine." Marianne laughed softly. Pouring. The interaction was warm, effortless. When she reached Selina's row, Marianne hesitated. Her eyes darted to the boarding pass tucked in the seat pocket, then back to Selina. "Oh," she said, her tone light but with an edge of surprise. "I didn't realize you were seated here. Would you like water?" Selina's jaw tightened. She had watched the champagne poured for everyone else. She let a moment of silence hang before answering. "Yes. Water is fine." Marianne nodded quickly and moved on, balancing her tray as if relieved to escape the interaction. Selina's fingers curled slightly against the armrest. She wasn't surprised this wasn't the first time she'd been treated like an anomaly in a place where she fully belonged. But there was still that sting, the tiny humiliation delivered in plain sight of others. Henry Walker raised his glass, sipping without acknowledgement. Maya's gaze lingered a beat too long before she ducked her head into her laptop. Selina opened her leather journal again, jotting down a line. First-class pre-departure beverage skipped champagne, offered water only, clear difference in tone. It wasn't just about the drink. It was about what it symbolized, the unspoken assumptions that she didn't belong, that her presence required explanation. A few minutes later, a younger attendant approached. Sophie Turner. According to her badge, she looked nervous, her smile tentative. "Can I get you anything else?" Ma'am Selina studied her face. Sophie wasn't hostile. She seemed caught between her training and the subtle signals passed down from her lead. Selina recognized that look. She had worn it herself once, early in her career, when she was too afraid to speak up against unfairness. "No, thank you," Selina said gently. Sophie gave a small nod, almost grateful, before retreating. The plane filled quickly. The overhead bin shut with a practice slam, and the announcements began. Passengers settled, conversations hushed. From the corner of her eye, Selina noticed Caleb Foster, the gate agent, peeking through the aircraft door. His gaze swept the cabin, landed briefly on her, and then shifted away. Selina caught the flicker of his expression, curiosity mixed with disbelief. She wondered what he was thinking, that she had somehow tricked the system, that she didn't deserve to be in 2A. She exhaled slowly, willing herself not to dwell. As the door closed and the plane began to taxi, Selina's mind wandered back to her earliest flights as an attendant. She remembered balancing trays in turbulence, the ache in her feet after 10-hour shifts, the biting comments from passengers who never saw her as more than a servant. She had learned resilience in those aisles, the quiet art of dignity in the face of disregard. But today, as CEO, the disregard hit differently. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what her passengers, especially those who looked like her, might be enduring every single day. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain, Ethan Bradley. We're number 3 for departure. Should be airborne shortly. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." Selina fastened her belt, her eyes fixed out the window as the plane accelerated. The engines roared, pressing her gently into the seat. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rush of takeoff ground her. When the plane leveled, Marianne returned with a tray of hot towels. She moved down the aisle, presenting each passenger with a smile. Henry received his with a thank you and a nod. Maya took hers, eyes flicking to Selina with a hint of concern. But when Marianne reached Selina, she paused. The smile vanished, replaced with a perfunctory glance. She set the towel on the armrest without a word, as if fulfilling a chore. Selina picked it up quietly. The fabric was warm, fragrant with lemon. She held it in her hands, feeling the small weight of the gesture, or the lack of it, across the aisle. Sophie's eyes darted toward her. Their gazes met briefly, and Selina caught the flicker of unease there. The younger woman knew something was off. She just didn't know how to name it. Selina leaned back, pressing the towel to her face, and allowed herself a single, private thought. How many times has this scene played out, unnoticed, unrecorded, forgotten? Her pulse slowed. She would not confront it yet. Not here. Not in this quiet moment. She wanted to see the full picture, to gather the evidence herself. The cabin returned to its rhythm-low voices, soft clinks, the hum of altitude. Outside, the sky deepened into a clear, endless blue. Inside, Selina sat in 2A, calm on the surface, her journal resting open on her lap. She wrote a final note before closing it. Patterns emerging. Watch closely. This is only the beginning. The first hour of the flight passed in a rhythm that felt almost orchestrated, trays rolling, the soft ding of call buttons, the occasional shuffle of passengers heading to the lavatory. For most, it was unremarkable. But for Selina Moore, every small detail carried weight. She had trained herself to notice the pauses, the tone, the inconsistencies others might dismiss as coincidence. She had once told her executive team, bias rarely screams. Most of the time, it whispers. Today, those whispers seemed to echo louder with every passing minute. Marianne Collins led the cabin service with the poise of someone who had done it for decades. She poured wine for Henry Walker, kneeling slightly to meet his eyes, voice warm with practiced charm. When she turned to Selina, the warmth cooled, replaced with an efficiency that bordered on dismissal. "Still water?" Marianne asked, as if the answer had been predetermined. Selina held her gaze. "I'd like a glass of Chardonnay, please." For a fraction of a second, Marianne's expression tightened. Then she gave a clipped nod and disappeared down the aisle. The wine arrived eventually, but without the ceremony, without the effortless ease afforded to others. Selina sipped, her expression neutral, inside. Though a storm was gathering, not just anger, but a profound disappointment. She had fought too long, worked too hard, to see these patterns persist in her own company. Across the aisle, Maya Lopez pretended to type on her laptop, but her eyes kept flicking upward. Selina noticed. The younger woman wasn't just watching, she was collecting. Henry Walker, meanwhile, remained cocooned in his own world, occasionally grunting at emails on his screen, never once acknowledging the disparities happening inches away. The meal service followed, another theater of small humiliations. Sophie Turner pushed the cart with nervous energy, her eyes darting to Marianne as if seeking constant approval. "Chicken or salmon tonight?" Sophie asked brightly, offering Henry the full choice. When she reached Selina, Marianne's voice cut in. "We only have chicken left here." Selina glanced at the cart. The silver lids revealed both entrees still steaming, untouched. Her brows arched slightly. "Are you sure?" Marianne's smile was polite, almost brittle. "Yes, ma'am. The salmon's accounted for." Sophie froze, her hands tightening around the handle of the cart. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to correct her superior, but no words came. Selina leaned back. Then chicken it is. The tray landed before her with a muted clatter. No linen, no quiet grace, just sustenance delivered begrudgingly. Selina cut into the meat, her mind elsewhere. She remembered a time years ago when she had been denied a hotel room during a layover, because the clerk assumed her company credit card wasn't real. She had stood outside in the humid night air, sweat trickling down her back, feeling invisible. Tonight, 30,000 feet above ground. That same invisibility tried to cloak her again, but invisibility wasn't her reality anymore. She was the one who signed paychecks, who spoke to shareholders, who charted the airline's future. The irony was almost absurd. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Shadows stretched across the aisle, softening the edges of the scene. Mary Ann passed by again, checking on passengers. "Everything good, Mr. Walker?" she asked warmly. Henry gave her a nod, murmuring thanks. When her eyes flicked to Selina, the words changed. "Need anything else, short? Functional?" Selina smiled faintly, her voice calm. "No, thank you. I'm fine." Mary Ann moved on without another word. It wasn't just the words themselves. It was the texture of them. Polite, but clipped. Professional, but hollow. It was the kind of treatment that stacked over time, leaving some passengers convinced they were imagining things, that maybe they were too sensitive. Selina knew better. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the thrum of the engines. In her chest, she carried both the sting of the moment and the clarity of her mission. This was why she flew in secret, because glossy reports and cheerful surveys never told the full story. When she opened her eyes again, she caught Sophie watching her. The younger attendant's face was conflicted, her lips pressed thin, her brow furrowed. In that look, Selina saw recognition, an unspoken awareness that something wasn't right. Their eyes met for just a second before Sophie glanced away, cheeks flushing. Selina leaned back in her seat, whispering inwardly, "She knows," but fear still holds her tongue. The cabin hummed on. Henry reclined, content. Maya's fingers tapped. But Selina noticed the corner of her phone angled slightly upward, the lens capturing snippets when Mary Ann passed. It wasn't overt, but it was deliberate. Selina didn't intervene. She simply observed, storing each moment like evidence in a case she hadn't yet filed. Dinner trays cleared, dessert offered. Once again, Henry was given the option cheesecake or fruit plate. Selina was handed fruit without being asked. She accepted it silently, though her pen moved swiftly in the journal resting on her lap. Patterns confirmed selective service, diminished choice, differential tone. Her handwriting was steady, each line etched with precision. Somewhere deep inside, though, she felt the tremor of memory, every insult swallowed, every look endured, every unspoken message that said you don't belong here. But she did belong, and soon the cabin would remember exactly why. The cabin had grown quieter as the flight pressed on, the sky outside now a deep wash of indigo. The seatbelt sign glowed softly, but most passengers had settled into their routines, movies flickering on seatback screens, laptops glowing with spreadsheets, or eyes closed in uneasy rest. Selina Moore sat upright, journal balanced on her lap, her pen resting just above the paper. She wasn't writing now. She was listening. Mary Ann Collins had slowed her pace, gliding down the aisle with the ease of someone who believed she owned it. She leaned over Henry Walker's seat, laughing at a comment, her hand brushing his arm lightly in a way that spoke of familiarity, even though they had only met an hour ago. Selina waited. She knew from experience that when people felt comfortable, when they thought no one was paying attention, that was when the truth slipped free. And then it came. Marianne turned slightly toward Sophie Turner, who hovered near the galley, fidgeting with a stack of napkins. Marianne lowered her voice, but not enough. "Some people," Marianne murmured, "don't belong in first class, no matter what their ticket says." Selina's hand stilled on the page. Her jaw set, but she didn't lift her head. She wanted the words to hang in the air, to find their own weight. Sophie's eyes darted toward Marianne, then toward Selina's row. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She gave the faintest shake of her head, a silent recoil from the cruelty of the remark. From across the aisle, Maya Lopez caught it too. Selina saw the young woman freeze for a moment, then lower her gaze to her phone. Her thumbs moved quickly. A discreet record button glowed faintly before disappearing under her palm. Selina breathed in through her nose, slow and measured. There it is, she thought. Not just oversight, not just tone. Words, naked and unguarded. Her instinct screamed to stand, to confront, to peel back the thin veneer of professionalism that shielded Marianne. But another voice inside her, the one that had carried her from flight attendant to CEO, whispered, "Patience. Let it unfold. Let them reveal themselves fully." She wrote nothing this time. She only closed the journal and folded her hands over it, the way her grandmother used to fold hers in church when she wanted to still her spirit. Henry Walker shifted beside her, pulling the blanket higher. His eyes were half closed. But Selina wondered if he had heard. If he had, he gave no sign. Sophie busied herself with refilling the coffee pot, her movements sharp, restless. Every so often, her gaze flicked to Selina's seat with something like apology written across it. Selina caught it once, offered the smallest nod in return, a recognition, an acknowledgement that she had seen, she had heard, she understood. The minutes dragged, heavy with unspoken tension. Marianne returned to the galley, laughing at something Henry had said as though the remark hadn't cost anything. But to Selina, it had cost plenty. She turned her head toward the window. The horizon had disappeared, leaving only darkness broken by distant clusters of light below. Somewhere down there, cities pulsed with life. People went about their evenings unaware of the small theater of injustice unfolding above them. Selina let the hum of the engine steady her. She thought of the people who flew Aurora every day, the single mothers heading to funerals, the teenagers on their first trip abroad, the elders clutching passports with trembling hands. She thought of all the passengers who didn't have her power, who couldn't reveal themselves as the CEO when the insults came. She whispered to herself, so low only she could hear, "This isn't just about me." Across the aisle, Maya angled her phone discreetly, her earbuds in to disguise the act. She caught snippets the tilt of Marianne's head, the dismissive tone, Sophie's troubled glances. Selina watched her from the corner of her eye, a quiet admiration stirring. It took courage to see and choose not to look away. The cart rattled again. Dessert plates cleared. Lights dimmed further. The cabin fell into near silence, punctuated by the occasional cough or clink of ice. Selina reclined slightly, eyes half closed, but sleep was impossible. Her mind kept replaying Marianne's words. Don't belong in first class. They weren't just words. They were a declaration, a reminder of every door that had once been closed in her face, every assumption that she had clawed her way through to stand where she stood today. And yet, she hadn't risen to where she was just to protect herself. Her rise meant responsibility. Tonight was proof of that. She turned the phrase over in her mind again and again, the way a jeweler examines a stone for flaws, not out of self-pity, but out of resolve. Every remark, every dismissal, every whispered bias was another crack in the system she was entrusted to repair. Finally, she leaned forward, switched on her reading light, and opened her journal once more. This time she didn't write about what had happened. She wrote about what needed to happen next. Accountability. Training isn't enough. Oversight must be real. Voices must be heard. Fear must not silence truth. She underlined the last sentence twice, her hand steady. Then she closed the book again, rested her pen inside the spine, and placed it carefully in the seat pocket. Her eyes drifted across the aisle to Sophie, who now stood at the galley curtain, shoulders slumped, expression unsettled. Their gazes met briefly in the dim light. Selina saw the flicker of conflict there, the young woman's silent plea. "I don't agree, but I don't know how to stand up." Selina gave her another small nod, almost imperceptible, as if to say, "I see you. I know. Your time will come." The engines roared faintly louder as the plane adjusted altitude. Marianne walked past once more, her heels clicking against the floor. This time, Selina didn't look away. She met her eyes directly, calm and steady. For the first time, Marianne faltered. The smirk slipped. She moved on quickly, vanishing behind the curtain. Selina settled back, her heart steady now. The moment had passed, but the story wasn't over. The real confrontation still lay ahead, and when it came, it would not just be about a drink, a meal, or a whisper. It would be about a culture, a company, an entire standard that she refused to let rot from the inside. She closed her eyes and breathed deep. The night stretched on around them, the sky outside vast and unbroken. In her mind, she repeated the words she knew would soon find their way to daylight. Justice is what we do when tested. By the time the dinner service began, the cabin had settled into a strange rhythm, half comfortable, half tense. Selina Moore could feel the air thick with unspoken hierarchies, the kind that didn't need announcements or rules to make themselves known. They played out in tones of voice, in the tilt of an eyebrow, in who was offered choice and who was handed what remained. The cart rolled forward again, this time heavier, carrying trays sealed with silver lids. The aroma of roasted salmon, garlic potatoes, and seasoned vegetables filled the cabin, mingling with the faint scent of warm bread rolls wrapped in linen. For most, it smelled like comfort. For Selina, it smelled like a test. Marianne Collins led the way with her usual polish. She leaned down toward Henry Walker, voice soft, almost indulgent. "Mr. Walker, would you care for salmon with asparagus or the roasted chicken with wild rice?" Henry smiled, clearly enjoying the attention. "Salmon. Of course. It looks wonderful. Excellent choice." Marianne's tone glowed with approval as she placed the tray before him, adjusting his napkin as though he were royalty. Selina watched, silent, as Marianne turned to her. The warmth evaporated. "For you. We have chicken tonight," Marianne said flatly, already reaching for the tray. Selina glanced at the cart. Beneath the gleaming lids, she could see at least 2 untouched salmon dishes, steam still curling from their edges. She lifted her eyes to Marianne's face. "Is there no salmon available?" Marianne's lips curved into a tight smile. "Those are reserved. Chicken will be fine." Selina didn't move at first. She felt the weight of the moment, the way Henry looked down at his tray, as if to avoid witnessing the exchange. The way Sophie Turner hovered beside the cart, her hands gripping the handle too tightly. The young attendant's eyes flickered between Selina and Marianne, panic in their indecision. Selina finally inclined her head. "Then chicken it is." The tray landed with a muted thud. None of the ceremony Henry had been given. No linen laid across her lap. No gentle explanation of the dish. Just a plate, delivered with efficiency and finality. Selina cut into the chicken, the knife sliding through tender meat. But her mind wasn't on the food. She thought of the thousands of Aurora Airlines passengers who flew each week. How many of them were handed what was left instead of what they had chosen? How many were silently told, in ways both small and cutting, that they didn't belong? Her thoughts were interrupted by Maya Lopez. The young woman across the aisle was pretending to scroll her phone, but Selina could see the recording light tucked discreetly behind her fingers. The camera angled just enough to catch Marianne's dismissive gestures, the disparity in service. Maya's jaw was tight, her face flushed. Selina felt a quiet surge of respect. The student might not have power, but she had courage, the courage to document, to witness, to ensure the story wouldn't be swallowed in silence. Dessert came next. Once again, Henry was offered choice cheesecake or fruit. He laughed, making some remark about calories, and chose the cheesecake. When Marianne turned to Selina, there was no question, just a fruit plate placed down briskly. "Here you go." Selina thanked her anyway. Her voice even. She took the fork, speared a piece of melon, and placed it carefully on her tongue. The sweetness contrasted with the bitterness rising in her chest. She opened her journal again. The words flowed in clean strokes. Meal service selective choices withheld. Tone differential clear. Evidence mounting. Her pen hovered. Then she added a second line, one she rarely wrote. Personal impact anger present. Reminder, stay measured. She closed the book and looked up. Sophie was standing near the galley curtain, her face pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She avoided Marianne's gaze, but her eyes found Selina's again, filled with a silent apology she couldn't voice aloud. Selina offered her the faintest smile. "A signal. I see you. You are not invisible in this story." The cabin quieted again. Trays cleared away. Henry leaned back, satisfied, his screen glowing with a financial report. Marianne moved with confidence, as if nothing was amiss, as if her authority in this small space were absolute. Selina sat straighter, folding her hands in her lap. She had chosen patience tonight, but each slight, each denial, was stacking like cards in a house waiting for a gust of wind. The gust would come. She could feel it. For now, she breathed deeply, letting calm settle over her features, even as resolve hardened underneath. She reminded herself that she wasn't just a passenger. She was a leader, a custodian of culture. And tonight the culture was revealing itself in raw, unfiltered form. Across the aisle. Maya lowered her phone at last, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. She slipped it into her bag, but her eyes met Selina's for a moment. It was fleeting, but in that look lay a message. People need to see this. People will know. Selina gave a subtle nod, as though granting permission. She turned her gaze toward the darkened window, the night sky stretching boundless and quiet beyond the glass. Inside, the tension hummed like the engines beneath their feet. She whispered to herself, low enough only she could hear, not yet, but soon. Hours into the flight. The lights dimmed to a warm glow. Most passengers leaned back with headphones or closed their eyes, The cabin softened into that half-silence. Only airplanes could hold a mix of hum, breath, and faint clatter from the galley. Selina Moore placed her pen down, flexing her fingers. She had written enough for now. She sipped the last of her lukewarm water and leaned slightly toward the aisle, her eyes catching the subtle movements of the crew near the curtain. Two silhouettes bent close together. Mary Ann Collins and Sophie Turner stood just beyond the half-drawn fabric, their voices lowered, but not low enough. "Doesn't belong here," Mary Ann's voice hissed, sharp even when hushed. "Look at the way she watches everything, like she's grading us. Probably some upgrade gone wrong." Sophie shifted, her reply strained. "Mary Ann, maybe she's just... I don't know. She's polite. She hasn't caused trouble." Polite wasn't enough for Mary Ann. "You don't get it. Sophie, some people think buying a ticket puts them at the same level as real first-class flyers. It doesn't. We have standards." Selina's jaw tightened, but she stayed still. She let the words hang in the air, recorded not by a device, but in memory, each syllable carving deeper into her resolve. Then, as though fate had choreographed it, the curtain swayed open slightly with the turbulence. Mary Ann caught sight of Selina watching. Their eyes met. Mary Ann's face blanched for a heartbeat before settling into her professional mask. She pulled the curtain shut with a sharp tug. Selina leaned back. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with a quiet fury she refused to let leak into her face. She whispered inside her mind, "This is the culture. Unchecked, unmasked, and it thinks it can whisper safely in shadows." Across the aisle, Maya Lopez, who had been pretending to sleep, had caught fragments of the exchange too. She looked toward Selina, her phone still in her hand, thumb hovering near the camera app again. Selina gave her the faintest shake of her head. Not yet. Timing mattered. Evidence mattered. Minutes passed. The hum of engines filled the silence where trust should have been. Henry Walker stirred, stretching his shoulders. He glanced at Selina, his expression caught between curiosity and discomfort. "Rough service tonight," he muttered under his breath, as if confessing to himself more than speaking to her. Selina replied gently, "Rough for some more than others." Henry swallowed hard, looking away. The seatbelt sign flickered on, the captain's voice calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're expecting mild turbulence. Please remain seated." The plane shivered, cups rattling softly. Mary Ann strode back down the aisle, checking seatbelts with efficient motions. When she reached Selina, she leaned closer than necessary. Her whisper edged with disdain. "Make sure that tray is up, ma'am. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Selina locked eyes with her, her voice calm. "I'm following instructions. Are you—" The exchange lasted a breath but cut sharper than steel. Mary Ann straightened quickly and moved on, her cheeks flushed, her authority suddenly brittle. When the turbulence eased, the cabin exhaled. Selina reopened her journal, writing in quick strokes. Whispered comments overheard, direct targeting confirmed. Witnesses present, bias escalating. Her pen paused. She added another line, softer, more personal temptation to respond rising. Reminder power is clearest when controlled. She closed the notebook with care. From the galley, Sophie emerged again, carrying a small tray with coffee. She stopped by Selina's seat, her voice quieter now, almost trembling. "Miss, would you like some Selina?" Tilted her head. The cup was porcelain, not plastic. A detail, a gesture. "Yes," Selina said gently. "Thank you." Sophie. Sophie placed it carefully, her eyes flicking up with a silent plea. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was recognition, perhaps even regret. Selina sipped, the bitterness of the coffee grounding her. As the hours stretched, the weight of the whispered words remained heavy in the air. They were more than insults. They were a mirror of an old system, a reminder that even in a company built on progress, shadows of prejudice could still linger, whispering behind curtains. Selina let the feeling settle. Painful, yes, but clarifying. Every barb sharpened her resolve. Every whisper prepared her for the moment she knew was coming. She looked out at the night sky, stars faint beyond the pressurized glass. In the reflection, she saw her own face calm, still, yet unyielding. Soon, she thought. Soon, the whispers would have no curtain to hide behind. The hours stretched into a kind of suspended twilight, the kind only long-haul flights could produce. Most passengers dozed with eye masks on, their breathing heavy and even. The hush should have been soothing. Instead, for Selina Moore, it pulsed with tension, the weight of what had been said and what had been denied. The hum of the engines pressed into her chest, steady but relentless. She folded her arms and closed her eyes, attempting rest, but her ears stayed sharp, her awareness unwilling to dull. From the galley came the faint clatter of cups and low voices again. Selina heard a stifled laugh, sharp as glass. She couldn't make out the words, but she knew the tone, dismissive, mocking. Her hand tightened around the armrest. She inhaled slowly, pressing the anger down into something quieter, something steadier. She had promised herself she would not rise to provocation. Not yet. Moments later, Marianne Collins swept down the aisle, her stride brisk. She stopped at Henry Walker's row, crouched lightly, and touched his arm. "Mr. Walker, can I freshen your drink? Perhaps another bourbon." Henry blinked awake, smiling. "Why not? One more won't hurt." "Of course." Marianne's tone was velvet. She rose, turned slightly, and her eyes landed on Selina. The warmth vanished. "And you," she said. "Coffee's cold. I'll take it now." Selina looked down at the half-full porcelain cup Sophie had given her earlier. She lifted it calmly, her voice even. "I haven't finished." Marianne's smile was thin. "We need to clear for safety." Selina glanced across the aisle. Another passenger still nursed a glass of red wine, untouched by Marianne's urgency. Selina lifted her gaze back to Marianne. "Consistency is safety." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Marianne's cheeks flushed. She took the cup anyway, her fingers brushing Selina's hand in a way that was neither careless nor polite. It was deliberate an assertion, a dismissal, a taking. Selina let her hand fall back to the armrest, her composure intact, but her decision made. Enough. Across the aisle, Maya Lopez sat upright now, no longer pretending to sleep. Her phone was already recording, angled low, but her eyes were locked on Selina, waiting. Selina gave no signal this time. She simply let the silence stand. Henry cleared his throat. Uneasy? That didn't seem right. He muttered, not quite meeting Selina's eyes. "It wasn't," Selina replied, her tone measured. "But silence has power, too." The seatbelt sign chimed again. The captain's voice calm, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent into Chicago shortly. Please return your seats and trays to the upright position." The cabin stirred, passengers adjusting, belongings shuffled back into bags. The ritual of arrival played out, but in seat 2A, Selina felt the ritual had already been broken beyond repair. She opened her journal once more, Her handwriting was crisp, unshaken, documented disparities consistent, escalation observed, whispers overheard, direct intimidation recorded internally, decision pending immediate action upon landing. She closed the book firmly. Her pulse slowed, not from relaxation, but from resolve. The storm was no longer inside her. It was focused, directed, ready. As the wheels touched down with a heavy thud, Henry exhaled, stretching as if the tension of the flight had finally released him. He glanced at Selina again, hesitant, as though unsure whether to apologize or excuse himself. He settled for silence. The plane taxied, the cabin filled with the usual chorus of seatbelts snapping open, bins creaking, voices rising in anticipation of escape. But before the crowd could surge forward, the captain's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for just a moment. We have a brief operational matter to attend to." Confusion flickered across faces. Passengers glanced around, murmuring. Selina rose smoothly from her seat. She walked to the front of the cabin, her steps measured, her presence suddenly unmistakable. She stood beside the cockpit door, her gaze steady on the crew. "Marianne, Sophie, please join me here. Now." The words were calm, but they carried the weight of command. Marianne's eyes widened, her composure cracking for the first time. Sophie looked stricken, her hands trembling as she stepped forward. Other passengers froze, watching, some curious, some uneasy, a few already sensing something monumental unfolding. Maya's phone angled higher, catching the moment. Selina inhaled once, letting the silence stretch. Then she spoke, her voice low but resonant. "My name is Selina Moore. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Airlines." A gasp rippled through the cabin. Henry sat upright, his mouth falling open. Marianne staggered back a step, color draining from her face. Sophie covered her lips with her hand. Selina continued, unwavering. "What I experienced on this flight was not service. It was discrimination, documented, witnessed, recorded, and it will not be ignored." The cabin had gone utterly silent, every passenger caught in the gravity of the moment. Selina's eyes locked on Marianne. "You treated me as less, not knowing who I was. That is the point. Every passenger who boards this airline deserves equal respect, regardless of what you think they look like, where you think they belong. Tonight, you failed that standard." Marianne opened her mouth, a protest forming. With all due respect, Selina cut her off, firm but calm. Respect is not claimed by saying the words. It is proven in action, and your actions spoke volumes. Her gaze shifted to Sophie. "And you? I saw your hesitation. I saw your conflict. That tells me you know the difference between right and wrong. You have a chance to learn, to grow, but silence in the face of bias is still complicity." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once, unable to speak. Selina turned to face the rest of the cabin, her voice rising slightly, carrying. "Let me be clear, this is not about me. I will be fine. I have power. But most passengers do not. They endure. They leave silent, carrying wounds no one else sees. Tonight, that silence ends here." The cabin held its breath. Selina looked back at Marianne and Sophie. "Effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation. You will disembark last, and you will account for your actions in full. The standard you set tonight is not the standard of Aurora Airlines." Marianne gasped. "You can't." Selina's eyes narrowed. "I can, and I just did." The words landed with finality, sharp and undeniable. The passengers erupted not with chaos, but with murmurs of awe, with claps that began softly and grew stronger. Maya lowered her phone, tears in her eyes, whispering, "They'll finally see." Selina stood steady, her voice soft but resolute. "Justice isn't what we claim in press releases. It is what we do when tested. Tonight was a test, and the response will define us." The plane came to a stop at the gate. The doors had not opened yet, but in that sealed space, something far larger than a flight had landed. Selina turned back toward her seat, her steps calm, her head high. She sat once more, folding her hands, waiting for the door to open, for the next stage of the reckoning to begin. The air inside the cabin felt electrified as the jet bridge connected with a hollow thud. Passengers shifted in their seats, eager to escape the tension of the last hours. Yet no one moved, not really. They seemed tethered by invisible cords, unwilling to break the spell of what had just unfolded. Selina Moore remained seated at 2A, calm, composed, her leather journal resting on her lap. Outside the window, the fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare washed the tarmac in sterile brightness, indifferent to the storm brewing inside the aircraft. A chime announced the opening of the door. The first-class curtain pulled back, and a gate supervisor stepped aboard. His name tag read Carl Benson, a man in his mid-40s with thinning hair and a posture that suggested both weariness and authority. He looked puzzled by the murmurs sweeping the cabin. "Good evening, folks," Carl began, his voice carrying that practiced blend of politeness and control. "We've been told there's an issue requiring my attention." Selina rose slowly, drawing every eye in the cabin once more. She met Carl's gaze directly. "There is, and it concerns your staff." Carl blinked, unsettled by the certainty in her tone. "Ma'am, I'll need a private word with you." Selina shook her head. "No. Transparency belongs here. This isn't just my word against theirs. This entire cabin has witnessed what happened. Some have recorded it. Silence breeds denial. Denial will not stand tonight." A ripple of murmurs followed, passengers nodding, some raising their phones slightly higher. Emboldened by her words, Marianne Collins, pale but defiant, stepped forward. "This is unnecessary. She's twisting things." Selina's voice cut clean through hers, firm but not raised. "Enough. Every passenger deserves dignity, regardless of race, gender, or background. Tonight, I was denied it on my own airline." Carl's eyes widened. "Your airline?" Selina reached into her bag, withdrew a slim folder, and handed it to him. Inside were documents bearing her name, her signature, her title Chief Executive Officer, Aurora Airlines. Gas rose from the seats, even louder than before. Carl's hands trembled slightly as he read. He looked from the papers to Selina, realization dawning like a floodlight. "Ms. Moore," he stammered. I had no idea." "That's precisely the problem," Selina said. Her tone carried both sorrow and steel. "It shouldn't matter who I am, whether I'm the CEO or a teacher flying home to her family. Respect should never be conditional." Maya Lopez's voice rang out from her seat, clear and young but brimming with conviction. "I have it all on video. Every word, every look." Henry Walker, flustered but finally finding courage, added, "She's right. I saw it too. It was obvious." The atmosphere thickened. Marianne's lips parted as if to defend herself, but the words faltered. She looked around, realizing the tide had turned against her. Sophie Turner stood beside her, eyes red, shaking her head as though silently pleading for release from the weight of complicity. Selina turned back to Carl. Effective immediately. These crew members are relieved of duty. They will not represent Aurora Airlines until a full investigation is complete. Passengers who bore witness tonight will be contacted. Their voices will be heard. Carl swallowed hard, nodding. Understood. Marianne's face crumpled. You can't do this on the spot. Selena's eyes fixed on her. Unblinking. On the spot is exactly when justice matters most. 5 minutes can define whether an injustice lingers or ends. Tonight, it ends. The cabin erupted into applause, not loud or raucous, but steady, insistent. It was the sound of solidarity, of relief, of recognition. Selena raised her hand gently, quieting the room. Her voice softened, carrying weight through its restraint. This is bigger than one flight, bigger than me. It's about every silent passenger who felt invisible, about the culture we accept, or the one we choose to change. Her words lingered like smoke in the air, impossible to ignore. Carl gestured awkwardly, trying to regain order. Passengers in first class, you may now gather your belongings. We'll escort you off. As travelers stood, some stopped to place a hand briefly on Selena's shoulder, offering gratitude without words. Maya walked past, her phone clutched tightly, whispering, "Thank you for not staying silent." Selena gave her a nod, quiet but resolute. "And thank you for witnessing." Henry lingered a moment longer, his voice low. "I was blind. I'm sorry. I'll remember this." Selena's reply was simple. "Then let remembering change how you see." When the last passenger had exited, only Selena, Marianne, Sophie, Carl, and 2 additional crew members remained. The silence now was heavier than the applause had been. Selena looked at Marianne once more. "I don't hate you, but I will not protect you from the consequences of your choices. What you whispered in the galley, what you denied with your actions, it ends your authority here. Effective tonight." Marianne's eyes filled with hot tears. She turned away, her mask of composure shattered. Selena's gaze softened as it moved to Sophie. "You hesitated. You knew it was wrong. That means you can change. You're suspended. Yes, but you will be offered a path mentorship, training, accountability. Take it, or waste it. That choice is yours." Sophie's voice broke. I won't waste it." Selena gave a single nod. "Then let this moment be your beginning, not your end." The gate doors opened wide. Selena stepped off first, her heels clicking against the bridge, her posture tall, her face calm. Reporters had not yet arrived. News traveled fast, but not faster than a single determined woman. Yet she knew by morning, every screen in America would carry the echoes of this night. The whispers had been buried. The truth had taken their place. The chill of the jet bridge melted into the charged air of the terminal, though it was late. O'Hare buzzed with its usual orchestra of rolling suitcases, distant announcements, and hurried footsteps. But around gate C-17, the ordinary rhythm broke. Word had already spread too quickly to be explained by whispers alone. Passengers who had left the flight lingered in clusters, some murmuring, others watching their screens as notifications lit up with clips from Maya Lopez's phone. The footage had already leapt from one device to another, a wildfire in the digital night. Selena Moore stepped into the terminal with calm, steady steps. Her presence seemed to part the crowd without effort. She did not hurry. She did not hide. The leather journal remained tucked under her arm, a quiet symbol of her control. Carl Benson followed uneasily at her side, attempting to usher her toward a private lounge. "Ms. Moore, we can find a secure space. The media doesn't have to." Selena stopped him with a glance. "They will, and they should." Silence is the only shield prejudice has left. Tonight, that shield breaks. As if on cue, a small wave of reporters arrived, drawn by texts, by tweets, by the unmistakable scent of scandal. Microphones appeared. Camera lights flickered on. Ms. Moore, is it true you were denied service on your own airline? Did the crew know who you were? What disciplinary actions will be taken? Selina raised her hand gently, and the voices quieted, the way they always did when true authority filled a space. Yes, she said clearly, her voice carrying over the gathered crowd. I am Selina Moore, CEO of Aurora Airlines. Tonight, on Flight 227 from Denver, I was denied the same dignity every passenger is owed. I was dismissed, demeaned, and treated as less not because of my actions, but because of assumptions. Gasps and clicks of shutters punctuated her words. Let me be plain, she continued, her tone calm but sharpened with purpose. This is not about my title. It is about every traveler who has endured treatment they did not deserve, every silence they carried home in private. Tonight, that silence was broken, and as long as I lead this airline, it will stay broken. Reporters leaned closer, voices jostling to be heard. What happens next? Are firings confirmed? Selina's gaze remained steady. Yes. The crew members directly responsible have been suspended, effective immediately. Formal review begins at dawn. Aurora Airlines will not protect discrimination under any uniform. Carl shifted uneasily beside her. But Selina didn't pause. She turned slightly, her eyes finding Maya Lopez in the crowd. And to those who spoke up, who recorded what others would rather hide, I thank you. Change does not come from silence. It comes from courage. Maya's cheeks flushed, her phone still clutched tight. For a brief moment, her youthful defiance softened into awe. The questions flew again. Will this affect stockholders? Is the FAA being notified? Will passengers receive compensation? Selina lifted her journal, its black cover gleaming under fluorescent light. Compensation is easy. Reform is harder, and reform begins tonight. Aurora Airlines will audit every complaint of bias from the last 5 years. We will contact every passenger who felt silenced. We will not brush aside what has been endured. We will not let it happen again. The crowd erupted with more questions, but Selina stopped speaking. She had said what needed to be said. Anything more would dilute the gravity of her words. She turned, walking toward the lounge doors with the same composure she had carried through every slight, every whispered insult. Cameras followed. Voices chased her, but she did not waver. Inside the lounge, the noise dulled. The space was all leather chairs and soft lighting, but Selina ignored its comfort. She placed her journal on the table and finally exhaled. Carl lingered near the door. Ms. Moore, forgive me, but this is going to explode. By morning, every outlet will be asking why it took so long. Selina finished for him, not why it happened. We know why it happened. It happens every day. Carl nodded, subdued. Selina lowered herself into a chair, resting her hands on the journal. For the first time that evening, fatigue seeped through her calm exterior. But it wasn't defeat. It was the weight of truth carried fully, finally, without apology. Her phone buzzed. A message from her communications director. Short and urgent CNN request at 6 a.m. Good morning, America by 8. Stock drop already trending. Call me ASAP. Selina closed her eyes briefly. She had known the storm was coming. She had not expected it to arrive so swiftly. Across the lounge, Sophie Turner entered quietly, escorted by an airline manager. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. She approached slowly, as though each step might shatter the fragile ground beneath her. "Ms. Moore," Sophie whispered, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I was scared." Selina studied her for a long moment. Then she gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit." Sophie obeyed, her shoulders hunched. Selina's voice was low, steady. "Fear is real, but fear cannot be the excuse. Tonight you saw what silence does. It protects no one. It destroys trust." Tears slid down Sophie's cheeks. "I know. Please, I want to do better." Selina's expression softened, though her tone stayed firm. "Then you will. You'll go through training. You'll confront what you ignored. You'll face passengers who have lived what you only watched. If you commit to that, you may earn back your place. But it will be earned, not given." Sophie nodded vigorously, her tears falling unchecked. "I will. I promise." Selina closed her journal with finality. "Then let this be your first lesson. Apologies mean nothing without change. Change begins now." The lounge door opened again. More executives were arriving, summoned by texts and alerts, their faces taut with worry. The night would be long. The battle just beginning. Selina straightened in her chair. The exhaustion slipped from her posture. What replaced it was resolve, unyielding, unflinching, the kind that turned whispered insults into declarations of reform. Because the story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every passenger who had ever been told, in subtle or brutal ways, that they did not belong. And tonight, belonging was reclaimed. By dawn, the Chicago skyline gleamed in shades of steel and rose. From the 40th floor of Aurora Airline's headquarters, the glass-walled boardroom filled with the muted shuffle of papers, the hiss of poured coffee, and the nervous coughs of executives who had seen the headlines. Selina Moore stood at the far end of the table, her leather journal open before her, every line of her posture precise. She hadn't slept, but no one could tell. The chair of the board, Richard Hanover, adjusted his glasses as he scanned a tablet filled with news clips. "It's everywhere. Selina, CNN, BBC, every major outlet. Stock is down 6% already. Investors are demanding answers." Selina closed her journal softly, her eyes sweeping across the faces gathered men and women who had trusted her vision until it threatened their comfort. "Then we give them answers, honest ones, not spin, not excuses, truth." A murmur of discomfort traveled around the table. Lydia Chen, head of public relations, cleared her throat. "We could release a carefully worded statement, acknowledging your experience, condemning discrimination, outlining steps we're considering." "No." Selina's voice cut gently but firmly. "We are not considering. We are acting. Last night was not an isolated incident. It was a mirror, and the reflection was ugly." Richard leaned forward, his voice heavy. "Selina, you're asking us to open the floodgates. If we admit systemic bias, lawsuits will follow. Settlements, investigations, this could cost millions." Selina met his gaze steadily. "What costs more? Richard's settlements, or silence? One destroys finances. The other destroys trust. And without trust, this airline has nothing." The room fell quiet. Executives shifted in their seats, some staring at the polished table as though it might offer escape. Selina opened her journal again, reading aloud. Documented disparities in meal service. Verbal targeting overheard. Witnesses present. Evidence recorded. This is not hearsay. It is fact, and facts demand response. Marcus Allen. Chief Operating Officer, spoke for the first time. His tone was cautious but respectful. "What exactly do you propose?" Selena's voice carried calm precision. "3 actions, effective immediately. 1. A full audit of all passenger complaints from the last 5 years. Every ignored call, every dismissed report will be reopened. 2. Mandatory anti-bias and dignity training for every employee, from gate agents to senior executives, 40 hours minimum, with certification required to continue employment. And 3. The creation of an independent passenger advocacy office, reporting directly to me, not filtered through middle management." Gas circled the table. Lydia shook her head. "That's too aggressive. We'll look unstable." Selena's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Aggressive is what saved lives when engines failed over the Atlantic last year. Aggressive is what rebuilt our fleet when competitors lagged behind. Aggressive is survival. This is no different." Marcus leaned back, nodding slowly. "She's right. If we don't lead, someone else will, and we'll be left chasing." Richard tapped his pen against the table. Frustration clear. "Selena, investors want stability, not upheaval. They didn't sign on for a crusade." Selena straightened, her presence filling the room. "This isn't a crusade. It's accountability. If investors cannot see that accountability strengthens stability, then they misunderstand the future of business." The silence stretched, heavy and taut. Then a voice came from the far end of the table. Evelyn Ross, the only other black woman in the room, head of HR. Her tone was quiet but firm. "I've read the complaints. I've seen the patterns. Selena's right. Pretending won't make them disappear. Facing them might." Selena inclined her head, gratitude flickering in her eyes. Richard sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "So you'll force the board's hand?" Selena's reply was steady. "I don't need to force anything. I'm telling you the path forward. If you can't stand with it, you'll watch from behind. But this airline will not retreat into silence." For a moment, no one moved. The weight of her words pressed into the air like gravity. Then Marcus spoke again, firm this time. "I second her motion." Evelyn followed a third it. Slowly, reluctantly, other voices joined, one after another, until the balance of the room shifted. Richard's pen stilled. He looked at Selena long and hard, then finally nodded. "The motion carries, but understand. Selena, you'll own this. If it fails, it's on you." Selena closed her journal once more, her voice soft but unyielding. "Then let it be on me, because failure is not acting. Doing nothing is the true risk, and I will not lead through fear." The meeting adjourned, the executives filing out with hurried steps, whispers trailing in their wake. Selena remained by the window, watching the sunrise scatter gold across the city. She allowed herself a single moment of stillness, of quiet triumph laced with the knowledge of battles yet to come. Behind her, Evelyn lingered. "That was bold," she said softly. Selena turned, her smile faint but real. "Bold is just another word for necessary." Evelyn's eyes glistened. "You didn't just speak for yourself last night. You spoke for every passenger who never could. Don't underestimate how far that will echo." Selena looked back out at the skyline, her reflection superimposed on the rising light. Let it echo. Then, until no one doubts that dignity is non-negotiable. By mid-morning, Chicago was no longer just waking. It was buzzing. Screens in coffee shops replayed clips of Selena Moore standing in the cabin aisle, announcing her identity with calm authority. Hashtags trended across every platform. dignity in the air, Aurora truth, and most prominently, justice in 5 minutes. Selena sat in a studio chair at the headquarters media wing, a team fussing over makeup she barely tolerated. The lights were warm, the camera lenses unblinking. She had done countless interviews before, but this one carried a different weight. This was not a quarterly forecast. This was a reckoning. The interviewer from Good Morning America, Diane Keller, leaned in with a sympathetic smile. Selena, thank you for joining us. Millions have seen the footage. Walk us through what happened last night. Selena's voice was calm, conversational, but each word landed with clarity. What happened to me wasn't extraordinary. It was ordinary. That's the problem. Passengers of color. Passengers who don't fit someone's assumption of wealth or belonging face moments like this every day. I simply happened to be the CEO, and the truth surfaced where it couldn't be ignored. Diane nodded. Some critics say this is a PR move, that by revealing yourself as the CEO in such a dramatic way, you stage the moment. How do you respond? Selena's lips curved faintly, not in amusement, but in steady resolve. If standing up to discrimination looks dramatic, that says more about the silence we've normalized than it does about me. I didn't stage anything. I endured it, and I acted because silence protects no one. The control room flashed a split screen showing clips of Marianne Collins handing Henry Walker salmon, then briskly dropping chicken before Selena. Another clip showed Marianne leaning in during turbulence, whispering her disdain. The public needed no narration. The disparity was undeniable. Calls flooded into the network. Viewers shared their own stories on live comment feeds, I was told, once I didn't look like a first-class passenger. My mother was refused wine while the man next to her got 2 glasses. This story is my story. Back in the studio, Diane asked, what does accountability look like? Beyond suspensions, Selena opened her journal, resting it on her lap. Accountability means 3 things: acknowledging harm, repairing it, and preventing it from happening again. We've begun all 3. We're reopening past complaints. We're compensating those wronged, and we're implementing structural reforms. But accountability is not a one-day headline. It is a culture. The segment cut to commercial. Selena exhaled softly, closing her journal. Her comms director, Alan Price, hurried over, his phone buzzing with updates. Selena, the reaction is overwhelming. Stock dipped at first, but sentiment is turning. Some investors are calling your stance visionary. CNN wants you live tonight. And, he hesitated, Marianne has already given a statement. Selena's brow lifted. Go on. Alan scrolled, reading aloud. I was targeted unfairly. The CEO made an example of me. This was a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. Selena's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in recognition. Denial is predictable. It's the final shield before truth takes hold. Alan leaned in, lowering his voice. Do you want us to push back hard? We can flood media with counterstatements? Selena shook her head. No. The truth is visible. Let the footage speak. Over-explaining suggests weakness. We don't fight denial with volume. We fight it with clarity. He nodded, scribbling notes. That evening, Selena appeared on CNN, facing a panel of commentators. Some praised her decisiveness. Others raised concerns about legal liability. Selena stayed centered, never defensive. What we saw wasn't just bias against me. She told the host, it was a culture permitted to operate unchecked. If that culture exists on one plane, it exists on others. And if we ignore it, we normalize it. Aurora Airlines refuses to normalize harm. The host leaned in. Do you believe this is an industry-wide issue? Selena met the camera lens directly. Yes, and I intend to call on every airline to face it. Pretending otherwise only delays what must be done. The clip spread even faster than the original footage. By midnight, union leaders, advocacy groups, and even government officials had weighed in. Some demanded congressional hearings on systemic discrimination in air travel. Others applauded Aurora Airlines for setting a precedent. At home, passengers replayed the viral clip not just for shock, but for catharsis. For once, the person humiliated in first class wasn't left powerless. For once, the story turned before the plane even reached the gate. In living rooms, people whispered, "She did what I wish I could have done." Meanwhile, in her private office, Selena finally allowed herself a pause. The city lights glimmered below, and her reflection gazed back at her from the glass steady, composed, yet undeniably human. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Sophie Turner. Just 5 words, I'm ready to do better. Selena stared at the text, her mind heavy with both sorrow and hope. People rarely transformed overnight, but sometimes a single night could plant the seed. She typed back 1 word, then begin. The weeks that followed were not quiet. Aurora Airlines became a national case study, every move of its CEO under public scrutiny. Some predicted the company would collapse under controversy. Others argued it would emerge stronger than ever. Inside the headquarters, Selena Moore convened a final roundtable. The glass-walled boardroom overlooked the city skyline, but no one's eyes drifted to the view. Every executive leaned forward, waiting for the plan that would define Aurora's next decade. Selena spoke with measured calm. We've acknowledged what happened. We've disciplined those responsible. But the true measure isn't punishment, it's transformation. Aurora must become the airline people point to when they say, "This is what equity looks like in practice." Her COO, Victor Alvarez, tapped a pen thoughtfully. Transformation means resources, training programs, structural audits, partnerships. We'll face resistance. Selena met his gaze. We will face resistance, but we've already faced worse. This isn't about making everyone comfortable. It's about making justice ordinary. The plan she unveiled was ambitious. The Aurora Dignity Initiative, a permanent division charged with monitoring bias in customer interactions. Passenger advocate officers embedded on every long-haul flight, ensuring accountability in real time. The Equity Data Portal, publishing quarterly metrics on satisfaction gaps by race, gender, and disability. The Horizon Scholarship Fund, seeded with $20 million, supporting underrepresented youth pursuing aviation careers. As she spoke, a sense of gravity settled over the room. These were not PR gestures. These were structural commitments. Victor finally smiled, a rare expression from him. It's bold. Selena, it's going to make some people nervous. Good, she said simply. Nervous means they're paying attention. Outside Aurora, the ripple effect grew. Competing airlines rushed to release statements of their own, but passengers weren't satisfied with hollow words. They compared policies, scrutinized training, and demanded transparency. Advocacy groups published guides ranking airlines not by ticket price, but by dignity. For the first time in decades, service culture, not just schedules or lounges, became a headline metric. Selena was invited to testify before Congress, under oath. She described Flight 607 not as a personal grievance, but as evidence of a systemic blind spot. Discrimination in the sky's mirrors. Discrimination on the ground. she told lawmakers. We cannot pretend our cabins float above society. Every passenger deserves equal respect, regardless of seat, status, or skin. The hearing drew international attention. In Europe, regulators began discussing similar transparency mandates. In Africa, aviation ministers cited Aurora as proof that leadership diversity could drive industry reform. But for Selena, the most meaningful feedback came from ordinary people. Letters flooded her office, a grandmother from Georgia thanking her for giving voice to indignities she endured in silence. A college student in Detroit writing that she now dreamed of becoming a pilot. A frequent flyer from Seattle confessing he had once stayed silent when he saw bias, but now vowed never again. Selena read every letter. She placed many into a large leather-bound book she kept on her desk, a living record of stories too often dismissed. Meanwhile, the suspended flight attendant, Sophie Turner, returned to the company after completing her probation and community work. She requested a private meeting with Selena in Selena's office. Sophie's voice trembled. I know I can't undo what I said, but working with those teenagers, seeing how much they fight just to belong, I realized I mirrored the very system that excluded me once. I want to be part of the solution now. Selena studied her for a long moment before nodding. Redemption is not owed, Sophie, it is earned. But if you are willing to do the work, Aurora has room for growth as much as it has room for accountability. Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. I am, months later. Sophie stood on stage at Aurora's first Inclusive Skies Summit, speaking to hundreds of employees about her transformation. She did not sugarcoat her past. Instead, she shared it as a warning and a lesson. The audience listened, rapt, many recognizing themselves in her journey. Marianne Collins, however, took a different path. After filing an unsuccessful wrongful termination claim, she faded from public view. Her name became a cautionary tale, whispered in crew lounges, a reminder that years of service did not excuse years of bias. The most unexpected twist came from Henry Walker, the silver-haired executive who had shared Row 2 with Selena. True to his word, he donated generously to the Horizon Fund and became one of Aurora's strongest allies in corporate circles. At a gala announcing the fund's expansion, Henry raised his glass to Selena. You turned one humiliating night into a movement, he said. That's leadership. That's legacy. Selena's response was humble. It wasn't me alone. It was every voice that spoke up after. One story unlocked thousands. That's the power of breaking silence. As the months turned to a year, the results were undeniable. Passenger satisfaction rose not just overall, but evenly across demographics. Complaints about discrimination dropped by more than half. Media headlines that once predicted Aurora's downfall now praised its resilience. In her quieter moments, Selena returned to the small leather-bound book of letters. She added her own reflections on blank pages, reminders of why she endured the pain of Flight 607, why she chose to act rather than absorb, why dignity had to be non-negotiable. One evening, after another long day, she stood before the art installation newly unveiled in Aurora's headquarters lobby. A sculpture of interwoven wings made of polished steel, each etched with the word respect in a different language. Beneath it, a plaque read, Many Journeys, One Sky. Selena ran her fingers across the cool metal and whispered softly, This is what justice feels like, not loud, not fleeting, but steady. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Her story was no longer hers alone. It belonged to every passenger who had ever felt small in a space meant to carry them high. It belonged to every employee choosing courage over complicity. It belonged to an industry learning at last, that equity was not separate from excellence, but the very definition of it. At its heart, this story is not only about an airline or a CEO. It's about the dignity each of us deserves in everyday life. Selena's courage reminds us that injustice often begins quietly, in small acts of dismissal or disrespect. Many of us, especially in older generations, know too well the pain of being overlooked, silenced, or underestimated. Yet the lesson is clear: silence only protects the system, never the soul. Selena chose not just to defend herself, but to transform the very culture around her. She showed that leadership is not measured in profits or titles, but in the willingness to stand for what is right when it is hardest. For us, the takeaway is simple and profound. Never underestimate the weight of your presence. Whether you are at work, at home, or in your community, your voice can shift the atmosphere. Your choice can alter the outcome. The message is not to fight with anger, but to act with clarity, compassion, and resolve. In doing so, you don't just claim your dignity. You open the door for others to claim theirs as well. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this journey with us. Stories like this remind us that dignity, justice, and compassion are not just ideas. They are choices we live every day. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep bringing powerful stories to light. See you in the next one.